Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Can an HOA president legally file a lien on your house and tow your vehicle, even if you're not a member of their association? That's the question I faced when my neighbor decided my vintage Airstream had to go. She thought she had all the power, but I knew a secret about our neighborhood's map that would change everything. I want to start by saying I am not a confrontational person. I don't go looking for fights. I don't leave passive-aggressive notes. I am not the kind of neighbor who keeps track of everyone else's business. But I am meticulous. I am precise. And when someone comes at me with a stack of threats they have no legal right to make, I tend to be very, very thorough in my response. I work as a licensed civil engineer. I have spent the better part of 15 years reading property surveys, plat maps, and legal descriptions. I know what an easement looks like, I know what a deed restriction is, I know the difference between a covenant that runs with the land and one that requires a signature. This is not hobby knowledge for me, it is literally how I pay my mortgage. And that matters a lot to this story. For years I had one specific dream sitting in the back of my mind. Not a vacation, not a car, not a boat. A vintage Airstream trailer from the 1970s, the long, silver bullet-shaped ones that look like something out of a sci-fi movie. I wanted to find a project, something rough and beat up, and spend a year or two bringing it back to life on weekends. My own hands, my own time, my own driveway. The driveway part was non-negotiable. Not a rented storage unit, not a facility across town. My driveway, so I could walk out on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee and get to work whenever the mood hit me. That meant when I started looking for a house, the absolute first thing I told my real estate agent was no HOA. Not a small HOA, not a friendly HOA, not an HOA that the listing agent described as barely active. None. Zero. My agent got the message. She filtered accordingly. But I also did my own checking. Every single property I seriously considered, I pulled the listing's legal description and looked up the county records before we even scheduled a showing. I am aware this is not how most people house hunt. Most people trust their agent and move on. I do not work that way, and in this case, that habit saved me an enormous amount of grief later on. When I found the house I eventually bought, I went through the due diligence process in a way that probably seemed excessive to everyone involved in the transaction. During closing, I personally reviewed the title commitment, the property deed, and the recorded plat map from the county. The deed had zero mention of any homeowners association. There were no restrictive covenants attached to the property. My lot was part of the original phase of the neighborhood built out in the mid-1980s, long before anyone thought to form an HOA. The neighborhood itself is what you might call a patchwork. The older section, where my house sits, was developed first. Then in the late 1990s, a developer came in and built out the adjacent section with new construction. That newer section formed its own homeowners association. Over the years, those two sections grew together visually. Same street grid, same general look, lots of the same trees. If you drove through without knowing, you would assume it was all one cohesive neighborhood under one set of rules. That assumption was incorrect, and it would eventually cause a lot of problems, but not for me. Shortly after I moved in, I noticed the woman who ran the HOA in the newer section. She was hard to miss. She was in her late 50s, always carrying a clipboard, and she patrolled the streets of her section with the kind of energy usually reserved for people who take things very, very seriously. She had the look of someone who had been told she was important and had fully internalized that message. I watched her from my yard a couple of times, measuring the height of someone's grass with a ruler, photographing a trash can that had been left out past the approved window. I remember thinking, genuinely, that I was glad that was not my problem. I had chosen my house carefully, specifically, so that it would not be my problem. I found my Airstream about 8 months after I moved in. It was a 1972, 28 feet long, and it had been sitting on a farm for the better part of 2 decades. The exterior was dull and oxidized with a couple of significant dents along one side. The interior had been gutted at some point, which was actually fine by me since I planned to redo it anyway. The bones were good, the frame was solid, it was exactly the kind of project I had been looking for. Getting it delivered required a flatbed truck and a driver who knew what he was doing. The trailer came down the street slowly, looking enormous in the residential context, and we got it pulled up onto my long side driveway without any drama. I had measured the driveway in advance, obviously. The Airstream fit with room to spare. I stood there for a good 10 minutes just looking at it, already running through the list of what needed to be done first. Within the hour, I noticed the curtains moving in a few of the houses across the street. That was fine. A 28-foot vintage trailer is not a subtle addition to any block. I expected some curiosity. What I did not expect was to look up and see the HOA president standing on the sidewalk across from my driveway, phone pressed to her ear, staring at the Airstream with an expression like she had just found a parking ticket on her windshield. She was not on my side of the street. She was on the sidewalk, technically public space, so I did not say anything. I just watched her for a moment, then went back inside. The next morning, there was a laminated notice taped to my front door. It was printed on what I assume was the HOA's official template, with the association's name at the top. It cited two specific provisions from the governing documents. One was something about recreational vehicle storage. The other was about maintaining community aesthetic standards. It demanded the RV be removed within 72 hours. It warned that failure to comply would result in fines of $100 per day, compounding until the violation was resolved. I read it twice. I did not get angry. What I felt was actually closer to amusement, with a quiet edge of focus underneath it. I set the notice on my kitchen counter, smoothed it out flat, and thought about what I was looking at. The notice assumed I was a member of their association. It assumed my property was subject to their governing documents. It assumed they had any authority over me whatsoever. None of those assumptions were correct, and I knew it with complete certainty because I had done the work before I ever signed a purchase agreement. So I did what felt like the right move in that moment. I filed the notice away in a folder, went out to the driveway, and started measuring the first dent on the Airstream's lower panel. The 72-hour deadline came and went. The Airstream stayed where it was. 2 days after the deadline, I was in the garage when I heard a knock at my front door. I came around the side of the house to find the HOA president standing on my porch with a man who looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. He was heavy-set, middle-aged, wearing a polo shirt and holding a copy of what appeared to be the association's governing documents. He had the posture of a man who had been told to come along but had not been told why. The HOA president introduced herself as the board president of the association and said she was there regarding my continued failure to comply. Her tone was the kind of tone that people use when they have decided in advance that they are dealing with someone unreasonable, slightly elevated, slightly clipped, ready for an argument. I told her that I had received her notice and that I was a bit confused about some things. I kept my voice completely level. I asked her if she could show me the specific provision she was relying on. She opened the binder and found the section without much trouble, which told me she had done this before. She read it out to me. No recreational vehicles, boats, or trailers parked in street view for more than 24 hours. I nodded. Then I asked if she could also point me to the document that showed my agreement to be bound by those rules. I said something like, "I must have lost my copy during the move, and I would appreciate having another one." That question landed differently than she expected. I could see it. She blinked a couple of times and then said that everyone in the neighborhood was automatically part of the association. That was just how it worked when you bought here. I asked her if that was documented somewhere because in my understanding, HOA membership and the covenants that come with it have to be attached to the deed. They have to be part of the public record, they have to be disclosed at closing, and they have to actually govern the specific lot number in question. I told her I had reviewed my deed carefully and I did not recall seeing any such attachment, but I was happy to look at whatever she had. She did not have anything. She knew it and I knew it. The man with the polo shirt had gone very quiet and was studying a point on my porch railing like it was the most interesting thing he had ever seen. She recovered enough to tell me that their management company had all the official records and that I could expect further communication. She also mentioned, and this was delivered as a threat meant to feel final, that they had a contract with a towing company and that they were not afraid to use it. I thanked her for stopping by and said I looked forward to seeing whatever documentation she could provide. Then I went back to the garage. About a week later, a certified mail slip showed up in my mailbox. I drove to the post office and picked up the envelope. It was from the association's management company, which is the outside firm that some HOAs hire to handle enforcement so the board doesn't have to do it directly. The letter was formal, and it meant business. It listed accrued fines of $700. It stated that a lien would be filed against my property if the fines were not paid within 30 days. It said the RV would be towed at my expense if not removed within 48 hours. It referenced the same two provisions the HOA president had cited at my door. Around the same time, I overheard something while I was doing yard work. The HOA president was talking to a neighbor 2 doors down, and I caught enough of it to understand that she was describing me as someone trying to lower everyone's property values with a junk heap. She said it the way people say things when they are confident they cannot be heard. I filed that away too. Here is where the engineer part of my brain kicked in completely. I did not call a lawyer yet. I did not draft a response to the management company. What I did was take a day off work and drive to the county records office. At the records office, I explained what I needed. The staff there are used to people pulling property documents, so it was not a complicated request. What I walked out with after paying the copying fees was a set of certified documents that I knew were going to end this situation permanently. The first thing I pulled was the official recorded plat map for the entire area. This is the document that shows exactly how the land was subdivided. The original phase of the neighborhood, including my lot, was platted in 1984. The newer phase, where the HOA was formed, was platted in 1998. The boundary between the two phases is a clear recorded line. My lot fell on the 1984 side of that line without any ambiguity. The second document was a certified copy of my own deed. Clean as a whistle. No mention of any homeowners association. No reference to any covenants, conditions, or restrictions of any kind. Just a legal description of my lot and the names of the parties to the transaction. The third document was the one I was most pleased to find. The HOA's own governing documents, their covenants, conditions, and restrictions are recorded public documents. They have to be, because that is how they become legally binding on the properties they cover. I pulled the recorded copy. Inside, there was an exhibit that listed every single lot number under the association's jurisdiction. I went through that list carefully, lot by lot. My lot number was not on it. I took everything home, spread it on the dining room table, and went through it with a highlighter. I marked the boundary line on the plat map. I marked the absence of any HOA reference on my deed. I marked the lot number exhibit in the CC and RS and circled the area where my lot number was conspicuously absent. Then I organized all of it into a clean folder in a logical order. I was not angry. I was ready. The 48-hour deadline from the management company's letter landed on a Thursday morning. I was up early, I had my coffee, I got dressed, and I brought my folder out to the front porch. I did not have to wait long. By 8:30, a tow truck had come up the street and parked at the curb in front of my property. A few minutes behind it came the HOA president's car, and she got out with her clipboard, along with the same man from before, plus one other person I did not recognize. She looked at me with the expression of someone who had come to finish something, confident, slightly theatrical, ready to make a point. I walked down my front steps toward them, folder under my arm, and said, "Good morning." She said this was my final chance. She said if I did not agree to have the trailer moved right then, they would be authorizing the tow truck to handle it. I turned to the tow truck driver first. I told him, calmly and directly, that I wanted him to understand something before he made any decisions. I told him that if his vehicle entered my property line without my permission, I would be filing a police report for trespassing and pursuing civil damages against him and his company personally. I said I wanted to make sure he understood the liability he was about to take on before he did anything. The driver, who had clearly been told this would be a simple job, put his hands up a little and said he was just there because he got a call. He did not move toward the trailer. He leaned against the door of his truck and waited. I turned back to the HOA president. I told her that when we had spoken at my door, I had asked her to provide documentation showing that her association had jurisdiction over my property. I told her she had not done that. I said that since she had not been able to find it, I had gone and done the research myself, and I wanted to share what I found. I opened the folder. The plat map was on top. I held it out so she could see it clearly. I told her what it showed. My lot, platted in 1984, sitting on the original side of the development. The HOA section formed in 1998, beginning at a specific lot number well past mine. I pointed to the boundary line, which I had already highlighted in yellow. She was looking at the map. Her expression had changed. The confidence was still there, but it had gotten quieter. I pulled out the certified copy of my deed next. I held it open and asked her to point to the part that referenced her association. I gave her a moment. She did not point to anything, because there was nothing to point to. Then I pulled out the HOA's own CC and Rs, the document she enforced on her own residents every single week with her clipboard and her ruler. I opened to the exhibit, the lot number list. I told her I had gone through every single lot on this list. I told her I could not find mine on it. I asked if she wanted to look through it with me to see if we had missed it somehow. She did not take the document from me. The man in the polo shirt had stepped back and was now standing slightly behind the other board member, closer to the street. The tow truck driver had gotten back into his cab. I closed the folder. I told her that she had been sending enforcement notices to a property her association had no authority over. I told her the fines she had threatened were not legally valid. I told her the lien the management company had mentioned would constitute a fraudulent encumbrance on my title if they followed through on it. I told her that the towing she had arranged would have been theft of property and trespassing, and that I would have had both civil and criminal remedies available to me. Then I told her, as clearly and calmly as I could, that if I received one more notice, or if I saw anyone from her association on my property again, my next communication would not be to her. It would be from an attorney, and it would be about damages for harassment and the intentional filing of a fraudulent lien. I wished her a good day. She opened her mouth once and then closed it. She turned around, walked back to her car, and got in. The board member followed without making eye contact with me. The tow truck driver had his engine running before she even reached her car, and he pulled away from the curb first. I stood in my driveway for a moment, looked at the Airstream, and went back inside to refill my coffee. I did not stop there because I wanted to make sure this was actually over and not just a pause. That afternoon, I sat down and drafted a formal cease and desist letter. I wrote it myself using clear, factual language. I laid out the same 3 points I had demonstrated to her in the driveway. I attached certified copies of all 3 documents. I stated that any further contact regarding this matter, any notices, any fines, any lien filings, any towing orders, any contact with my property in any form would be treated as intentional tortious conduct and responded to with immediate legal action. I had it sent via certified mail to the HOA's official registered address, which is on file with the county as part of their corporate registration. I kept a copy of everything. The outgoing letter, the tracking number, the signed receipt when they accepted it. That was my paper trail. If it ever went further, I had a documented record showing that I had explicitly placed them on notice in writing with proof of delivery that their conduct was unauthorized. Any attorney looking at that situation would have had a very easy time explaining to a judge what happened next, if anything happened next. Nothing happened next. The first couple of weeks after that were quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that feels watched. I noticed the HOA president's car driving past more slowly than seemed necessary a couple of times, but she never stopped. She never came to the door. No notices arrived, no certified mail. Weeks became a month became 2. A neighbor from the HOA side of the block, someone I had waved to a few times, stopped at my fence one evening while I was out working on the Airstream. He was friendly and a bit sheepish. He said he had heard things had gone sideways with the board. He said at the most recent HOA meeting, the HOA president had apparently been confronted by several board members about what she had done. Word had gotten around, as it tends to in neighborhoods like this, that she had spent months threatening and harassing someone who had never been part of the association, using fines and towing threats she had no legal basis to make. The management company had apparently been less than thrilled to learn about the situation as well, since it exposed them to potential liability. He said she had stood up at the meeting and made some kind of apology for the way the situation had been handled, framing it as a misunderstanding, and then she had resigned as president. I thanked him for telling me. I genuinely did not feel triumphant about that part. I did not set out to end someone's tenure as a volunteer HOA president. I set out to be left alone to work on my trailer in my own driveway, which is a thing I had every right to do and which I had specifically arranged for before I bought the house. But I also was not sorry. She had called my property a junk heap to a neighbor while threatening me with fraudulent fines. She had tried to tow a vehicle she had no authority to touch. She had sent a management company after me with a lien threat on a property they had no jurisdiction over. If the consequences of that ended with her stepping down from a volunteer role, that was not something I had done to her. That was something she had done to herself. The Airstream was coming along by then. The 2 biggest dents on the driver's side were gone. I had sourced a patch kit for the lower panel seam and spent a full weekend getting it right. A section of the exterior aluminum, maybe 4 feet wide, was polished to the point where you could see your reflection in it. Not perfect yet, but you could see what it was going to be. I had a specific vision for the interior. The original 1970s aesthetic, but updated. Light wood panels, warm leather seating, a small but functional kitchen setup. I was taking my time with it because the point was never to rush. The point was the project. The point was Saturday mornings with coffee and the sound of whatever I was working on that week. My neighbor from a couple of houses down on my side of the block, the non-HOA side, had started wandering over on weekend afternoons to watch the progress. He was a retired mechanic and had opinions about the right way to do things, most of which were correct. We had figured out a rhythm where he would watch and occasionally offer a suggestion, and I would pretend to consider it for a moment before either agreeing or explaining why I was doing it differently. It was good company. Life in that neighborhood settled into something easy and uncomplicated. I did my work during the week. I worked on the trailer on weekends. Nobody bothered me. Nobody taped anything to my door. The certified mail slot stayed empty. A few months after the driveway confrontation, I was sitting in a lawn chair on a warm Saturday afternoon close to the Airstream, letting a section of polish cure before I buffed it out. I had a cold drink. The street was quiet except for a couple of kids riding bikes somewhere down the block. I looked at the trailer, at the section of aluminum catching the afternoon light, and felt something that is hard to describe precisely. It was not pride exactly, though there was some of that. It was more like the specific satisfaction that comes from having been completely right about something and having been able to prove it without raising your voice. The whole situation, from the laminated notice on my door to the tow truck pulling away from my curb, had never required me to be angry. It had never required me to guess or bluff. I had simply known the facts, documented the facts, and presented the facts at the moment they were most needed. I had bought this house specifically to avoid that kind of conflict. I had done my homework, checked every document, and confirmed my position before I signed anything. And then when someone came at me anyway, I had exactly what I needed to shut it down completely, legally, and permanently. The HOA president and her board had gone completely silent. The management company had gone silent. No notices, no fines, no follow-up of any kind. The only mail I get these days related to the Airstream are shipping confirmations for parts, a replacement window vent I found from a supplier out of state, a set of original spec cabinet hinges from an estate sale listing, a length of chrome trim that matches the original profile exactly. From where I sit in that lawn chair, looking up the driveway at 28 feet of slowly becoming something beautiful aluminum, the view is exactly what I wanted it to be when I started looking for this house. No covenants, no conditions, no restrictions, just mine. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I worked for a government agency that provided a service to the public through a website. I was working on a part of the website that confirmed whether or not users wished to delete their user accounts. As usual, to protect against accidental or malicious account deletion, the user has to click "Delete my account." They are then shown a screen, "Are you sure you wish to delete your account?" And if they click yes, then their browser goes off and tells the server to delete their account and withdraw from all jobs they've applied for. This next bit is a tiny bit technical for those who are interested. 1. When you go somewhere in your browser, it sends a GET request to the server because it wants to get the page contents plus image contents, etc. 2. When you submit a form, such as signing in or confirming you wish to delete your account, your browser sends a POST request to the server. A post means the server is going to change something, such as deleting your account, whereas a GET merely means, give me something but don't make any changes. When you click a link in a browser, for example from Twitter, your browser will only ever do a GET, it will never a POST. This is why confirming you want to delete your account should be a POST, so nobody can trick you into visiting a link and doing some harm. So, back to the story. The project manager was really rubbish at her job. She wasn't technical at all. Another member of staff used to assist her, which basically involved him doing all of her work and her asking him how he did it but never seeming to remember. I was making some modifications to the site in this area when I spotted the requirement was to have the delete account confirmation page as a GET. I pointed out to her that I could easily send her a link in an email, and if she clicked it, then it would delete her account on the server and withdraw her from all her job applications, and that we should change the requirement to make it a POST. To hide her inadequacies, she would often shout people down, and that's exactly what she did. Told me just to do what I am supposed to be doing rather than trying to change the requirements at this late stage and delay the release. The problem is, from experience I knew that she often makes uneducated decisions, and then when they backfire, she either genuinely doesn't remember them or lies. So, I went back to my computer and I wrote to her. Paraphrased, Can you confirm something for me? The specification says to make the delete account confirmation screen a GET request. It really should be a post because it deletes users' accounts. I am concerned a malicious person could post a link on Twitter and everyone who follows it will have their account deleted and all their job applications canceled. I just want to make sure I have understood you properly and I am not being thick. You said you want it to remain a GET request rather than changing it to the more secure POST request. Is that right? She replied, yes, as it is in the specification. So I went and implemented it as instructed. Once the changes had been deployed to our internal test servers, I emailed the head of the quality assurance team. Hi, lead QA. Have you seen this cool job on the server? With a link to, can you guess? That's right, the delete account confirmation page. He received the email, opened it up, then clicked the link text that said, this cool job. A browser opened, took him to the test server, and he was greeted with a message telling him how sorry we were to see him go and that all his job applications have been withdrawn as requested. Lead QA. What? Where have all my test job applications gone? Typing frantically. Lead QA. They've actually gone. Is this a trick? Are they really deleted? He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He asked how I had hacked the system, and I explained to him the rookie error that had been made. He logged a top priority critical security fault and rejected the release candidate, delaying the release until it was fixed and could be retested the next day. When she saw the bug that had been logged, the project manager went mad. Who wrote this? She demanded to know loudly in front of the whole office. I did, I said. Why on earth would you make it so other people can so easily trick you into deleting your account? I walked over to her so I could speak quietly and not embarrass her. I did warn this would be possible, but you insisted this is the way you wanted it. Now this is the point where she always claims she would never do something stupid. No, I said the opposite. Me. No, you definitely said to do it this way. Her. No, you've misunderstood. This way makes no sense. I would never have told you to do something that makes no sense. My experience was that she often told me to do things that made no sense, and then when they backfired, she would say she couldn't possibly have said to do something so nonsensical, and the fault must lie with someone else. Her. I suggest you go back and do it properly. I went back to my computer, pulled up the text conversation, and called her over. Me. Look, this is where I explicitly asked if you want me to do it as a GET as per the specification, and what will be possible if we don't change it to a POST, and you told me to do it according to the specification. Her, quietly. Well, just change it. Me. I will do it properly. The release was delayed for a day so it could go through testing again. Note. Testers wipe the server clean for each test round and rebuild the data through scripts so I didn't upset the lead QA guy. Much. The next one is an entitled people story. As a single-digit age kid, I spent my summers working for the family business, one part of which was running the concession contract at a small local music venue. Popcorn, burgers, fried chicken, pre-made salads, drinks were the bulk of what we had, but there was a small formal dining area, about 30 tables, on a patio overlooking the wooded ravine. These tables were by reservation only, but on super slow nights without a lot of reservations, walk-ins were allowed. For this restaurant area, we did not have a liquor license, so we couldn't serve wine with dinner. Sorry, getting a license for a seasonal, weather-dependent outdoor venue that was only open 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, just wasn't worth the hassle. And since we were just the concessionaires, it wasn't even our venue, so we couldn't get one on our own if we wanted to. One of the most common types of shows would be a symphony orchestra or well-known string ensembles. We had major concerts with B-list and former A-list stars sprinkled in, but those were outnumbered by the classy performances. And where you have classy performances, you have uptight snobs who can't eat a bite of food without wine. They know they absolutely deserve it, and nobody had better tell them no. For most people, we would say we have no liquor license, so, and listen carefully here, we do not serve or sell wine. We also cannot tell people it is okay to bring their own wine. Again, listen carefully. We cannot tell people it is okay, as in we cannot give permission. Liquor laws. Enter the entitled couple who are making a reservation on the phone. We had a steady trickle of people like this, and the conversation always went the same way. Couple. It was always the wife. What kinds of wines do you serve? Us. I'm sorry, we do not have a liquor license, so we do not serve any wine. Couple. What kind of restaurant doesn't have wine? This is a very special occasion. Names the occasion as if that made a difference, and we can't enjoy it without wine. Can't you make an exception just this one time? Us. We apologize, but we do not have a liquor license. Couple. Well, can you get one? How hard can it be? Us. Silence. Couple. Well, we'll just bring our own and then you can serve it. Us. I'm sorry, but without a liquor license we cannot serve wine, and the venue does not allow alcohol to be brought through the gate. Note. We had nothing to do with the venue or the gate. Their policies were their policies. And while there was technically a rule against bringing in alcohol, people routinely brought in picnic meals and snacks to have on the grassy areas. And while there was a rule against bringing in alcohol, they did not check bags or coolers with Michelob brands on them. For some of the big concerts like Three Dog Night, US family kids could get like $50 in aluminum a night after the show was over, with us racing the venue ground screws to collect as many cans as possible. Couple. So we can't even bring our own wine in? Us. I cannot give you permission, but they don't check the bags. The owners told all of us to word it exactly like that. We weren't allowed to tell somebody they were allowed to bring in booze, but since we were under the venue's policies and their official policy was to not check the bags, we could say that. About half picked up on the dance. You don't check the bags at the gate? Well, would we be in trouble for having wine with dinner? We do not serve wine, that's all we are saying. I don't suppose you have any wine glasses we could borrow, do you? Certainly. Would you be borrowing 2 or 4? Do you have a corkscrew we can borrow? Absolutely. Great. Party of 2 for the Go-to-Clue family. We look forward to seeing you then. The other half would yell, scream, insult, threaten, bully, cajole, plead. If they would just shut up and think for a moment, they would be able to pick up what the others did, but they wanted to fight. They wanted to win more than they wanted to chug their $3 chuck and pretend to be grown-ups. They wanted to pretend to be classy for a night, but they clearly weren't. People who don't listen when being told how to get things done when permission can't be given really need to stop and think. I once tried to help a guy keep a brand new $8,000 furnace without giving him permission, but he wasn't listening, so he walked away with nothing. I felt really bad for him, but there was nothing I could do. Anyway, thank you for watching.